All right, welcome to Insight. I'm Paul Arthur, and we're going to talk about creation and evolution today. How did we get here? How did life begin? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Are we here simply by random chance? Enough time, enough slime, from goo to you, and all those cute expressions there. But it is a serious question. Does science prove this? Certainly your kids' teachers are teaching them quite regularly in science class that we evolved with time and chance, essentially, which does have some serious implications on the meaning of life and why we're here. Okay, and what happens, of course, after we die, and we all die. So there is eternity, certainly, that comes into the equation out of all of this here. So, and of course, your kids are going to come home asking some of the questions, what they've been taught in school. Mom, Dad, did we really evolve? Does the Bible, does it have anything to do with science at all? Can we trust it? Right, these are the kind of questions I think that come into kids' minds here as well. Does the Bible contradict science, or does it actually agree with science? So how do you handle that with your kids? Love to hear you. If you have any questions yourself, we may have some doubts, can I trust the Bible? Is the earth young? Is it old? Okay. Is there life on other planets? Where did Cain find his wife? All these kinds of doubts that jump into our mind for sure. So why don't you jot down those questions? And you can email them to us, insight@miraclechannel.ca, or a little later in the program, we'll open up our phone lines for you as well. So just jot down those questions that have been bugging you for a while. All right, and we're going to talk about it. How did life begin? How did we get here? All the creation versus evolution issues. Our guest today is Richard Fangrad. He's the CEO of Creation Ministries International, their website, creation.com. And you might recognize Richard from being the co-host of Creation Magazine Live, which airs right here on Miracle Channel on Saturdays and Sundays as well. Well, Richard, good to have you here.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be back.
Hey, and before I forget, let me put a quick plug in for those watching in Medicine Hat. You're going to be in Medicine Hat, I guess this weekend, right?
Yes.
Saturday, 7 o'clock I've got here. Medicine Hat Church of God, and also
That's right.
Sunday morning at 10:30 and at 7 o'clock again in the evening on Sunday. Again, Medicine Hat Church of God. And you've got a Red Deer conference coming up.
Yes, in a month from now. Actually, it'll be over in a month from now.
Okay.
But October 25th to 27th in Red Deer. We're going to have 7 speakers, 16 presentations. It'll be an intensive teaching conference.
Yeah.
And we're going to fly up some of our U.S. guys. We'll have guys with PhDs there, scientists and so on, talking about quite a range of topics, actually, all concerning the creation-evolution issue. We'll have Gary Bates there from our U.S. office talking about aliens. Did God create life on other planets? That kind of thing. Dr. Jim Mason, he's from Ontario. He's here in Canada. And he's got a PhD in experimental nuclear physics.
Okay.
And so I love saying that, experimental nuclear physics. He's quite a guy. He's going to talk about physics and radioisotope dating. That's a big question in this whole age of the Earth discussion, is that dating method giving us dates in the millions or billions of years, and how do we understand that as Christians? So we're going to have a fun time
for sure
there in Red Deer.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds very, very good. Okay, mark it down, and if you're in that area, by all means, a great opportunity to get equipped. And really, I think that's what we need to do, is equip our families on this issue. Certainly making some of the news here as well recently. Bill Nye, the Science Guy. Used to watch him as a kid, you know? A lot of us did, right? He's a pretty funny guy, and very creative in his presentations. But he's been in the news lately for saying, well, basically that parents shouldn't be teaching their kids from a biblical creation model.
Yes,
because
there's a YouTube video that went viral and so on. He's saying that, well, parents really shouldn't teach their kids creationism because then they won't be involved in science, and we won't have engineers anymore that can move society forward and so on. And of course, there's so many errors in that. We actually did a parody video. If you go to creation.com, we did a little video there, actually using some of the same words that he did, and just it wasn't necessarily a point-by-point rebuttal, but just it involved just a poor understanding of science on his part. People call evolution science. But science has to do with things that we can observe and that we can test, and we can do experiments in a lab or out in the field. We can observe things happening. And of course, evolution, both evolution and creation, don't fit into that category.
Exactly. We have to be honest. We say
past.
neither one of us have been able to observe that,
That's right.
verbatim,
That's
with
right.
our eyes and so forth. And I just chuckled because I know as soon as you said that, I thought, I wrote this down because I thought, my goodness, Dr. Richard Dawkins, very, very famous atheist, of course,
Yes,
and
yes.
scientist, he was asked if evolution has been observed, and his response, at least that's what you have on your website, I guess you've got it documented there, his response was evolution has been observed, it's just that it hasn't been observed while it's happening.
Yeah, Dawkins is a brilliant writer. He's written a lot of books that have influenced millions and millions of people toward atheism. He's a brilliant writer, but he doesn't do so well if he's on like a live show like we are today.
On the spot, he's not so great with the responses.
And that was, I believe, he was asked a question during a radio interview, and that was his response. I'm sure if he would have sat down and written a response, it would have been better. As I said, he is a brilliant writer.
We've observed it, just not while it's happening. I observed it, officer. I saw the whole accident, just not while it was happening. Yes, okay.
Yes. And there's been other sayings as well.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't want to just spend time making fun of people who disagree with me, but it is kind of a funny comment. But the point is, and that's what we're going to come back to, what is the evidence actually? What does the evidence say? I mean, okay, so let's take an objective look at that if we can.
Right. And that involves, again, both creation and evolution are beliefs about the past. They still involve science. They still involve making observations. And then we have the facts that we can all observe in the present, and there's no disagreement there. At that point, when we get up to that point and just make observations, there's no disagreement. There isn't a single observation that an evolutionist would make that a creationist disagrees with. It's not an argument about facts.
Okay.
But then there's a departure.
The interpretation. What do
The
those
interpretation.
facts mean?
Because we interpret those facts within a history that we, by faith, accept. And as Christians, we accept the history that's in the Bible. It's God's Word. God created it. It was followed by a global flood, and there's Tower of Babel and all kinds of other events in there. And, of course, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. It's history. And the evolutionist comes at the facts from a completely different perspective. It's millions of years of evolution, no God. And so we can look at an example. In 2005, there was a dinosaur discovered in Montana, a very remote area of Montana. There was no roads going there. They had to fly the bits out by helicopter. And when they came to the femur, that's the large leg bone of the T-Rex, it was too big for the helicopter, so they broke it in half. And they discovered that there was soft tissue in the dinosaur bones, including blood vessels and blood cells. Dr. Mary Schweitzer, the lead paleontologist there, said you could squeeze out the contents of the blood vessel, and there was stretchy tissue and so on.
But of course, if this is millions of years old, how does that work? Because DNA doesn't last that long.
Well, we've got two interpretations, either the millions of years or the Bible's interpretation. So the facts are the same. Everybody agrees that you got a dinosaur bone with soft and stretchy tissue in it, and then one interpretation, in this case, makes a whole lot more sense than another. Either this dinosaur died millions of years ago, or it died recently.
Yeah, so soft tissue, how long is soft tissue scientifically supposed to last?
Well, that's the real question, isn't it? I mean, we would say that most of the fossils are a result of being buried, animals and plants being overcome at the time of the flood. But the flood was about 4,400 years ago. Can that material last more than 4,000 years? I doubt it. It makes more sense, scientifically and just logically, that dinosaur was overcome maybe in spring flooding or something like that 400, 500, 600 years ago. I mean, it might sound strange, but there's fresh dinosaur bones. What do you do with that? They can't be millions of years old.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
out of the question. Well, I think that's what threw the scientists off there. They really didn't know what to do with it. And I'm not sure if they've come up with a real good response to that yet or not. I'm not sure.
Well, their response is there must be some preservation happening here that we don't fully understand.
Okay,
that's their response.
It didn't fit their previous model again,
no,
for sure.
No.
So, and that's the whole point. Let's think this through here, and let's question the evidence. Where does it really point to?
Right.
All right. Hey, you mentioned actually one of the speakers is going to be addressing intelligent life as well. You see lots of headlines on that as well. So might want to ask you a few questions of that in just a moment here as well. But I want to actually show a quick clip here of just taking our cameras to the streets here and asking people, it's an interesting question, thought-provoking question, but we just ask people for their thoughts on, is there intelligent life on other planets?
I think it's very improbable.
I believe that there are other people other than us.
No, not at all. I forget who did the equation or what it's called. I think Carl Sagan do a good one, but just based on the number of stars in the galaxy based on the number of galaxies, based on the likelihood of having planets in those galaxies, and the likelihood that a planet will be in the Goldilocks zone, which is the zone that supports life as we know it. There's got to be intelligent life somewhere.
How do you think that they came into existence?
I don't know.
I'd be willing to go with the main scientific theories of the day, basic Big Bang, evolution, that sort of thing.
I really don't know. I just have that feeling that they're there.
All right, there you go. I'm just wondering, can we find intelligent life here on Earth, right? Sometimes we wonder about that. But yeah, lots of people I've talked to, including Christians, think that there could be intelligent life on other planets. Interesting question to ponder. Biblically speaking, what do you think?
Well, biblically speaking, I mean, and that is where we need to turn in order to answer these questions and many others. We can summarize just a little bit that would give us some insight into how we can answer this question. Adam's sin caused the entire universe to be cursed. Paul says in Romans 8 that the entire creation groans and travails in pain, and etc. We all know that verse, which means that if there was intelligent life elsewhere, say Spock on planet Vulcan or whatever it might be, then Spock would be all these aliens would be under the curse of Adam, but only descendants of Adam can be redeemed from the curse. In Ruth, we learn about the kinsman redeemer. The redeemer had to be one of our kin, a human, to redeem the sins of humans. So then these other beings, intelligent beings, are under a curse that they can't get out of. And so you wind up with these paradoxes.
It doesn't line up real well with
it doesn't line up with the Bible, no.
With what the Bible says, I think. Now, scientifically speaking, again, outside of the Bible, is there evidence for that? Well, again, the Mars rover and so forth, it's been in the news here recently, but, no convincing evidence that I've seen so far anyway.
Right. And I don't think there'd be a problem with, like, microbial life on Mars or something. We can understand how perhaps an impact in Earth in the past blasted some rocks off, and they maybe landed on Mars or something like that, and took some life with them. I don't think anyone would have a problem with that.
So that doesn't contradict the Bible in that
No,
sense.
it would be intelligent life, beings that are self-aware, that type of thing.
Well, let's talk about natural selection a little bit. That's always one of the big ones for the evolutionist side of things, and I want to equip our viewers here in how to come back to that. I mean, how can we explain it? Because, again, I think, there's a lot of pressure on our young people, for example. I mean, you've got, authority figures, essentially, teachers and scientists. You go to university, and, you kind of get laughed out of class, right, if you bring up the whole creation model concept. So natural selection, survival of the species sort of thing. How do we respond to that?
Well, natural selection, creationists wrote on natural selection long before Darwin. In fact, when Darwin in the 1830s...
That may be a big surprise for people. You're saying creationists actually wrote about natural selection.
Yes.
That does happen before Darwin ever did.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Many people wrote on natural selection. And that often, and you just brought that up, that often surprises people. We'll have at some of our meetings, we'll have atheists come out, evolutionists come out, and they're waiting for the question time just to give an example of animals changing from generation to generation.
Yeah.
And they think, that'll do it. Then that's it. That's the end for creation. And when our speakers when we start talking about natural selection, yes, animals change. There's shocked looks, and you believe in natural selection? Well, how isn't that evolution? So there is a disconnect between natural selection and evolution. And when we talk about natural selection, we often highlight that the one does not equate to the other. Natural selection, as it turns out, is actually brilliant engineering by God. It enables populations of living things. It prevents them from going extinct at the slightest climate change. Living things can adapt to changing
adaptable.
climates.
Can you give us an example, I guess, that perhaps an evolutionist would use to say, well, here's the change?
Okay, if you imagine dogs, for example, or let's use a real example. I was going to use a hypothetical one. There's an island called Madeira. It's owned by Portugal. It's about 600 miles off the coast of Morocco. And Darwin made a big deal about this. There was some beetles on the island, and there were beetles that had wings, and the same type of beetle that didn't have wings. It's very windy there most of the time, and the beetles with wings get blown off into the ocean, and they die. And there was a mutation years ago in some of the beetles. It stopped them from producing wings. And so they are now the dominant beetle on that island. And evolutionists have hailed that as, this is natural selection. See, nature has selected the better variety of these beetles. And we would certainly agree with that. Yes, those beetles are now better adapted to that windy island. They're not getting blown off into the ocean and drowning. But that's a terrible example of evolution, because the beetles have lost the ability to produce wings. If I was an evolutionist, and that's being promoted as evidence for evolution, I would be really disappointed at that. Because the beetles,
That's more of a devolving.
It's exactly. They're heading toward extinction. I mean, if that's an example of evolution, they lose the ability to fly, and maybe next time they lose the ability to crawl, and next time they lose the ability to breathe.
But I think their argument would be, well, they did it in order to survive, so that's a positive, right?
And we agree with that.
Okay.
Yes, they did it in order to survive. Those beetles are now better adapted to the environment. That's adaptation. That's natural selection. We agree with that, always have. But it's not evolution. Those beetles are not, they're not generating new things. See, evolution, if you
So in other words, yeah, I mean, and certainly it's not going to, that's not evidence that the beetle is evolving into a different species.
Right.
For sure not.
It had something that was functioning well, wings, and now it doesn't have it anymore. So it's going the wrong direction. Evolution, we're told, starts with a single cell, and then that single cell develops all kinds of things that we see today into the animals and plants that we have today. That single cell wouldn't have had the genetic instructions to build things like feathers, for example, just picking an example. It didn't have it. It had the information to build itself. And then evolution says over millions of years, it somehow got the information to build feathers for everything nowadays that has feathers.
Okay.
So evolution requires the gaining of massive amounts of new genetic instructions to build new things. That's the story of evolution.
Well, let me ask you then, I guess, has any of the natural selection observations, things we've observed, does any of it add more information, you know, to the genome or to the, you know, the way the, the genes or whatever you want to call it, how they're designed, or insects or plants or animals, whatever it is, anything that adds intelligence or information to it, you know, they gain feathers or they gain wings. Is there anything like that?
No. There's never been, from the scientific world, there hasn't been a single observation of a mutation, some type of a change to the genetic instructions that has added information. Now, some viewers might be saying, well, hold it, wait a minute. There are examples of where mutations produce something new.
Okay.
And a couple of years ago, there was a famous example, nylonase. These bacteria developed the ability, through a number of mutations, to digest nylon. And it was
so
huge
it's something
news.
new.
It's something new, but that's the result of the degradation of something else that worked well. And the analogy that I use to explain that, it gets a little complex, but think of a bicycle. If you take a sledgehammer and you dent the front wheel of the bicycle and then drive the bicycle, now it's doing something new, isn't it? As a result of a mutation.
Right.
The tires are no longer round. It's doing something that it hasn't done before, but it's not getting better. The round tires were better. Yes, it's a new function. It's a new feature. The bicycle now drives down the road like a horse. But
so you're saying the animals, or this bacteria is digesting nylon. You're saying
Yes.
it's not good, you're saying?
it's a result of the degradation, the breaking of other systems. And in the process of breaking those other systems, it's doing something different. In this case, it's pretty interesting. It's digesting nylon. It wasn't doing it before, but that's still a part of the degeneration of that particular bacteria. And the degeneration doesn't fit with evolution. Evolution's supposed to make things better, and new features and functions and more information, different instructions to do something better. And that's not what we saw with that mutation. The systems that are working in a particular way have been mutated and now are degenerating. It's just like the bicycle. The bicycle was working well, and then you mutate the front tire. It's doing something different, but it's on the way to getting worse. And that's the opposite of evolution.
I think it's probably one of the fundamental difficulties with evolution, if I understand it correctly, is that essentially the changes that happen are a result of mistakes, mutations, right?
Right.
These are
Yes.
things that go wrong. All right, now again, the idea would be the natural selection picks the best one, the best mistake, if you will, and we build on that. I don't know of anything that builds on mistakes.
Well, but no, that's not quite what evolutionists
Okay.
believe. That's the right formula. You have mutations plus natural selection produces evolution from one kind to another. And on that
Okay.
simple level, people think, well, it's the concept of mutations that we have. Evolutionists feel that mutations make things better. And so mutations produce all these new features and functions, and then natural selection chooses the best one of those.
So the mutation they're saying is not necessarily a mistake, it's just a change. Is that what they're saying?
They're saying they've admitted that most mutations are negative,
Okay.
but
they're
they
saying
still
some...
have to believe that some add all kinds of new information.
Okay.
And the problem is science doesn't see that. So it doesn't fit with what we observe. We don't observe mutations doing that. And so it's a huge problem for the evolutionists.
Oh, for sure. Okay. Well, you know what? Again, we're going to open up the phone lines in a little bit here, and I welcome any skeptics, that sort of thing. Yeah, fire off those questions and see if we can stump Richard Fangrad, again, CEO of Creation Ministries International, and a great website, creation.com, that answers actually a lot of those questions and doubts and issues that come up. All right. And again, I mean, we need to get equipped, I guess, in how to respond to these things. I mean, I was just asking some questions, and I wasn't clear on some of these things, obviously, right? You know, just asking you and hearing, listening to your response. So we need to get trained, I think, in this as well. Let me ask you this. Are there some arguments that we use as Christians that, frankly, aren't great arguments when we, talk about evolution? And
There
things
are.
that we maybe, a couple of key ones maybe we need to avoid using.
Yeah, there's actually a section on the website called Arguments Creationists Shouldn't Use.
Right.
And it's old arguments where, see, the Bible doesn't change, thankfully, so you learn it once and it doesn't change, but science always changes.
Okay.
And so we're using science to kind of flesh out the details that God didn't give to us in the Bible, like what was going on in the flood. How do we explain the fit of the continents, for example? And does that, because the Bible doesn't mention anything about that. So we develop models based on the best science that we have, the best knowledge that we have to explain these things. Okay. And in the past, some of those models have fallen down. For example, the argument used to be that the sun is powered primarily through fusion, and that would last. That would enable it to burn for millions of years. And the thing is, we didn't see the neutrinos that would be produced by that. And the neutrinos are a high-energy particle, and we didn't observe them. And so the argument was, well, the sun isn't powered mostly by fusion. It's powered by other methods that would burn up the sun's fuel faster, so the sun can't be that old.
Oh, okay.
It was an argument
Gotcha.
for a young sun. Well, a number of years ago in Sudbury, Ontario, they built the SNO, the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory, and they observed the neutrinos, the number of neutrinos that we should be seeing if the sun is powered mostly by fusion.
Okay.
So when that observation happened, that argument for a young sun fell off the radar. And that's one of them that you'll see there.
Moon dust might be another one? Is that,
moon dust,
right?
that was a popular one.
Yeah.
Many viewers probably have heard of that one. The Apollo landers were equipped with these massive pads because it was thought that there would be many feet of this powdery moon dust that's been coming onto the moon for millions of years, but there was only a few inches. But the original calculation about how much moon dust there should be, even given millions of years, by the time the Apollo missions went to the moon and landed there, they weren't expecting many feet of dust. They were expecting just a few inches. And so that was based on initial values that were wrong, that both evolutionists and creationists used. So and then there's other things based on misconceptions of what evolutionists are saying. People say, well, if humans evolved from apes, how come they're still apes?
Right.
And that's an argument that we shouldn't use based on sort of a caricature of evolution. We want to know what the evolutionists are actually teaching. They're not saying that humans evolved from apes.
Okay, that is very interesting.
Yep.
Because again, I think that many of us who would use that argument right over the years. You're saying no, things have changed. They're not really using that approach at this point. So let's not go there. It's
Humans
not
and
be
apes have
helpful.
had a common ancestor.
Okay. All right, lines open right now, and so we want to take some of your phone calls here. 1-888-816-2545, anywhere in Canada. And again, you know what? If you have questions and doubts as a Christian, you're welcome to ask those. If you're not a Christian and you want to stump the guest, go ahead, fire away. That's all right too. All right, and you can email us your questions. Insight@miraclechannel.ca. Insight@miraclechannel.ca. How did life begin? Is the earth young, or is it in fact millions of years old? And does it line up with Scripture? All right, that's a fair question to ask as well. All right, we're back. River of Life Church hosting a conference coming up in October here, the Living Free Conference, October 12th to 14th. A couple of guest speakers from Florida, actually. Dr. Ron Kuykendall and Jerry Gardner are going to be there. And the focus is on healing the wounds of life that we all encounter, unfortunately. All right, but that's just real life, and they're going to talk about how to get free from that. So thus the Living Free Conference. If that's something you could use, the cost is $25 per person or $40 per couple. You can call this number for tickets, 320-2005, 320-2005, and you can get full details on the conference as well online at www.rolchurch.ca. Again, that's happening at River of Life Church, hosting the Living Free Conference coming up October 12th to 14th. And that's today's Local Life.
Community leaders, pastors, event organizers, missionaries. We want to know about your inspiring story or event happening in Southern Alberta. Call the Insight team at 403-380-3399 or email insight@miraclechannel.ca. Local Life is your connection to Southern Alberta.
Our guest today, Richard Fangrad, CEO of Creation Ministries International. Their website, creation.com. Excellent site to get yourself or your kids equipped on defending the faith, defending Christians' creationism, and of course just finding out what evolutionists really do believe and do teach, so we get some intelligent responses to that. He's also going to be in Medicine Hat. For those of you watching there, 7 o'clock this Saturday, Medicine Hat Church of God. Also Sunday morning at 10:30 and that evening 7 o'clock. And also in Red Deer, about a month from now, October 25th to 27th. They'll be having a big conference there, all kinds of speakers, some from the States as well. So mark that down. You can get, again, details online at creation.com. So, all right, lines open, 1-888-816-2545. Love to hear from you. Any questions you have, any skeptics, you're welcome to come in here. Or maybe you could share some of the stories you've had just debating this with other people, what has worked and what has not worked. You can call us 1-888-816-2545 or drop us an email, insight@miraclechannel.ca. Let's begin with some phone calls. I'm going to Ruth from Saskatchewan first. Hi, Ruth. Ruth, you're on the air with Richard Fangrad. Go ahead. Okay. Let's go to Marie then from Alberta. Hi, Marie.
How are you today?
I'm well, thanks. Yeah.
Good. I want you to know that I personally believe what that's about creation.
Mm-hmm.
I also believe that when God created the universe, He meant to inhabit the universe with mankind, but because of sin, God put us on earth. And I also believe that when He comes back, the entire universe is going to be inhabited.
Oh.
I'm very sorry for those people who do not believe. They should just take a look back at Noah, in Noah's time. There were many people who are acting like these skeptics today, and guess what? They seem to forget. They are awaiting their punishment. Only 8 people were saved.
Well, it does deal with eternity. It's certainly, heaven and hell in the balance. Yeah, I mean, if we're here by accident, of course, I mean, morality doesn't really matter, frankly. It's a really, yeah, I mean, it's, your morality could be different than mine, right? It doesn't really matter in that sense. So it does definitely tie in with that. And any thoughts on, the whole universe being inhabited? I don't know if the Scripture actually, says anything like that, but I guess it would be a possibility.
Yeah, I've never found anything like that in the Bible. So it's an interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think that fits much better with heaven, with the new heavens and new earth, where we'll spend eternity in a sin-free a sin-free existence, worshiping and glorifying God forever, and exploring the creation.
Could we explore creation? Could we travel to other galaxies and so forth? Well, why not? I don't know. I mean,
I think
with
it's
God,
possible.
it's certainly possible. I mean, I'm looking forward to finding out. But yeah, no, interesting thought. Thank you for that, Marie. All right, let's go to another phone call from Ruth. Ruth from Saskatchewan. Hi, Ruth.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Is it that the development of better species of wheat, which are more productive and rust and fungal resistant plants, is a degeneration of evolution or mutations?
Okay, so you're saying there's some species of, or some kinds of wheat that are better now than they used to be?
Yeah, they're more productive and
Okay.
much rust resistant and fungal resistant.
So did they evolve then? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
we
so
would-
how does this work?
Well, that came about as a result of science, as a result of genetic modification and so on.
So that's an intelligent design then?
It is intelligent design, very much so.
Okay.
Where you're breeding different types of crops. If there's a variety of different crops, and you find that this variety is more resistant to frost, well, you'd take that variety and not favor the other. So it's sort of artificial selection, and then of course genetic manipulation as well, where you take the good genes that result in they can withstand pesticides or whatever it might be,
Right.
and scientists develop new varieties of plants, and that's it's good for us, and it's controversial as well. Some folks feel that,
it is, yeah. Whether it's good or not, that's another question.
Yes.
But now, is there anything that Ruth is saying that, do you know of anything that is happening naturally, I guess, in the sense the seeds are becoming more resistant to things, or that sort of thing, becoming better? Are they? Or
Well, those things
without anything being put into them?
Those things will happen naturally, yes. As
Okay.
climate changes, it selects, or as the environment changes, food supply and so on, the ones that are best adapted to that environment are the ones that will survive. And again, it's just brilliant engineering by God to allow, if the environment changes or food supply or whatever, so that entire crops or species of animals or whatever don't immediately go extinct. It's brilliant engineering, actually.
So I can understand the evolutionaries, their argument saying, well, this is just happening by chance, and we would argue, well, no, it's happening by design. And how does either one of us, prove, our point, right? I mean, it's pretty hard to do, isn't it?
Yes. Part of that is wrapped up in the term natural selection, and that implies that nature is sort of producing something new. But what's happening there is it's programmed adaptation.
Yeah.
That's a much better term. God programmed different varieties into different groups of living things so that they can adapt to changing environments. It's a design feature by God. That's the best way to understand
All
that.
right. Now, appreciate that call, Ruth. All right. Lines open at 1-888-816-2545. Any questions you have, things that have bothered you? What about this? I mean, is this, prove biblical creation? Or does this actually reinforce what our kids are being taught in class? Evolution is the answer for this. What do you think? All right, so your questions welcome. You can also email us, insight@miraclechannel.ca. Let's go to David's email. You and your guest mentioned carbon dating during the first part of the show. I don't know what carbon dating is about. Could you please explain that process? Thanks for that, David. Yeah, carbon dating, radioactive dating, all that kind of stuff, right? There's different methods they use these days. And again, are they accurate? Because they're saying, well, we can accurately measure this back, literally hundreds of millions of years. I mean, well, boy, that's a pretty big time frame to get accurate on. But
it is. That's right. And the accuracy that's debatable. But carbon dating it's a type of radioisotope dating that's a little bit different. Carbon dating has nothing to do with millions of years, and I know many of the viewers that'd be maybe the first time they'd heard that.
Yeah.
It's other radioisotope dating methods that give the millions and billions of years. Carbon-14 is far too radioactive. It never gets that old.
Decays too quickly.
It decays too quickly.
Okay.
After about 100,000 years, that theoretically you could perhaps measure something that old, but that gets to the limit of the technology we have nowadays.
Okay.
And carbon dating dates things that were once living. The dating methods that give the millions and billions of years involve dating rocks. It's igneous rocks that are dated this way. And here's how the method works. A rock is thrown up out of the earth, and when it cools and solidifies, that's when the clock begins. And it will encapsulate something that's radioactive. And that something, uranium decays into lead, potassium into argon, rubidium into strontium. Those are some of the isotopes that evolutionists use, hence the name radioisotope dating. And it's important to note, I suppose, that evolutionists, no one measures the age of something. I mean, we have microscopes and we have telescopes. We don't have pastascopes. That's not how it works. We measure the amount of the radioactive parent product and the amount of the daughter product that it has decayed into, and then we infer, we calculate an age. That's how the method works. And no one disagrees with that, but there are assumptions that go into all dating methods, including radioisotope dating, that make it that lead to inaccuracies. You have to assume, number one, that all of the material that you're measuring began as radioactive material. If the rock, when it was thrown up out of the earth, molten, already included some of the daughter product, that's going to artificially inflate the date for all your rocks.
Oh, sure it would, yeah.
You have to assume, number two, that the nuclear decay rates were constant from the radioactive parent to what it decays into. That's not radioactive anymore. And we now know that decay rates have varied in the past, say at the time of the flood, probably during Creation Week. There's good science. You can go to creation.com and read on some of that. Assumption number three, you have to assume that during the history of the life of that rock, none of the parent product or daughter product was added or removed. In the case of the uranium-lead method, both of those elements dissolve in water. So you can send a portion of the rock away for radioisotope testing, get a date, hold the other part under water for a couple of days, send it in and get a different date. Because you're leaching in or leaching out uranium or lead. They both dissolve in water. And all of those assumptions play havoc with the method. I mean, we've taken rocks.
So you're saying this could make significant differences or just minute differences?
Significant differences.
Okay.
I'm a bit of a Lord of the Rings fan, and those probably many viewers are, but those movies were filmed on a volcano in New Zealand. And that volcano, where they filmed those movies, it erupted in around 1950. And about 10 years ago, when the rocks were 50 years old, about 50 years old, we took samples from a number of those lava flows and sent them away to be dated. And they came out to between hundreds of thousands and 3.7 million years old, various different samples. They were 50-year-old rocks.
Yeah.
It's not because the method is bad, the theory's bad, that I just
So you're saying these rocks were literally formed out of the lava?
They were lava flows, and then when they cooled and solidified, about 50 years ago, when we did this testing, that's when the clock begins. And the rocks come out to hundreds of thousands,
so what's
up
the response
to millions
to
of
that
years
then?
old.
Yeah, it sounds kind of funny, but so what's the response? I mean, what's the explanation from an evolutionist?
Evolutionists wouldn't publish that data because it doesn't work. Obviously not, because the rocks are 50 years old. 50 years ago, people saw those lava, they saw the rocks form. It's in the newspapers. You have newspaper clippings and when that mountain erupted.
Well, I want to see some headlines on that.
So,
just me. I want to get both sides out. Okay. All right. We're talking with Richard Fangrad, again, with Creation Ministries International, creation.com, great website to get yourself equipped. And you can give us a call with your questions. Again, skeptical or not, you're welcome. Right? No questions offline here. All right. So you just whatever you want to ask, it's fine. 1-888-816-2545. Lines are open right now, or you can drop us an email. Let's go to Lisa from Alberta. Hi.
Thanks for taking my call, gentlemen. First of all, I want to say that we really enjoy the website, the children and myself.
Oh, super.
They love they're excited to get the newsletter, and they love the books. And they're really well done. The whole family enjoys them, really.
Good for you. Good.
Okay, so my question is, I like to always say that I believe without seeing. I've spoken about this numerous times with you, Paul, and on the show. But at the same time, that whole question about the Earth's age, my secular friends, that's always the first thing they bring up when we talk about this. How old is the Earth? And I tell myself, well, I question that myself. And then I think, well, I'm not really believing without seeing, because I've obviously seen something produced by some scientist that's telling me the Earth is, older than 6,000 plus years. So I feel like I'm contradicting myself.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because, you see it in the headlines constantly, how, new evidence, again, confirming that the Earth is, millions or billions, I'm not sure what it is these days, of years old. So how do we respond and, seem reasonably intelligent, right? In doing that, you seem, boy, I'm a Neanderthal because I think the Earth is young. So what's our response to that?
That does come into it, because if you're in an academic or an intellectual environment and you stand up and say, well, yeah, I think God created about 6,000 years ago, it doesn't sound, it uses the word Neanderthal there. Well, that's the impression that comes across. And I can certainly relate to what Lisa said about this, that, how do we understand? Well, I guess as Christians, we should start with the scriptures and what does the Bible say about when God created? And we can look at, just very simply, look at the genealogies in Genesis 5 and Genesis 11. And those genealogies, unlike the ones in Matthew and Luke, they have dates. They have the year between this guy, when he was this old, that's when the next generation came. And when he was this old, that's when the next generation came. We have the exact year between the creation of Adam and the birth of Abraham. It's 2009 years. So if you want to get a ballpark figure for the age of the earth, ask any archaeologist when Abraham lived. And whether they're Christian or not, they'll tell you Abraham was born around 2000 BC. Everybody knows that. No one is suggesting that Abraham lived 4000 BC or 8000 BC. And so you add on another 2009 years, and you get to, without doing any complicated math. And many people have undertaken to do a biblical chronology.
For sure. Now, this is not going to carry a lot of weight with secular friends, though, right, Lisa?
Right.
So,
that our perspective, I mean, if we're Christians, we're thinking biblically, and that's where we start from. And then it's important to understand there are over 200 ways to age date the Earth. And we just talked about radioisotope dating. 90% of all those methods don't give an age that's long enough for evolution. It's only 10% of the methods that do give the millions and billions of years. And it would seem, if we were being scientific about this, that you would go with the 90% of the dating methods as perhaps urging us in a particular direction, that the Earth and the universe is a whole lot younger than we think, and question why the 10% seem to be anomalous. Radioisotope dating is one of those 10%.
Okay.
But
all right. Well, let's cut them some slacks. Yeah, right. Let's go with the 10%. And again, they're saying, I mean, what is it now? The universe is about 14 billion years old. Is that what it is?
15, I think. It used to be 13.7, and then just recently, I think it's 15 billion years now.
Okay, for the universe.
Yeah.
And the Earth would be
4.6.
4.6 billion. Okay.
Yep.
And again, some of this has to do with, I guess, the speed of light, light years with stars and so forth, that sort of thing as well.
Right.
So, I mean, so how do you counter those arguments? And, by saying, well, yeah,
that's a big question.
Right?
People think, okay, well, there's these galaxies that are hundreds of millions of light years away, which means at the speed of light, it should take hundreds of millions of years for us to be seeing the light from those very distant objects. How come we're seeing the light already if God only created about 6,000 years ago? Now, that question has been considered so insurmountable by some folks, and I've met some, that they've rejected Christ because of it. They said that Christians will never have an answer to that question. The Bible must be wrong, therefore I'm not accepting Christ. So for some people it's huge. Other people have never thought about it. Interestingly, there's not just one, but there's about 5 different young Earth creationist models to answer that very question. How come we're seeing the light from those distant galaxies? I'll give one very briefly.
Okay.
And this involves Einstein's theory of relativity. And whenever you mention Einstein, things are going to get hairy, right?
Okay.
So Einstein said in the early 1900s that gravity affects time. In a stronger gravitational field, time slows down. And that's, as crazy as that sounds, Einstein was right. It's been experimentally verified many, many times. Now, how does that relate to this question? The Bible says in about a dozen different places, God stretched out the heavens like a tent or like a curtain, which means that before the stretching, everything must have been closer together. And if the Earth is near the center of all of the matter in the universe that used to be closer together, that means gravity here would be very high, while gravity out here is very low. So it's possible that while minutes or seconds go by on Earth, millions or billions of years elapse at the edge of the universe, plenty of time to allow the light from those galaxies to get to Earth, so that on day 6 of creation, when Adam and Eve first see the night sky, they see approximately the same night sky that we see today.
So you're saying time actually travels at a different speed in the outskirts of the universe?
The speed of light is constant, but time changes. It's relativity. I've left out many, many details, but they're the basics.
That's as clear as mud to me, yes.
You can go to creation.com and get the details. In fact, there's a lot of details. Just type in starlight and time in the search.
But it is interesting. It does lend some credibility to even use the name of Einstein. But his idea, and you're saying it's been confirmed today, that gravity actually slows down time as we know it. Is that correct?
Right.
So time is affected, and that's what we're dealing with here is time, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what we're saying. Is the Earth young or is it old? Well, time apparently is not constant.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
That's right. Yeah, and one of the ways in which that's used is I used a GPS to get here to the studio today, and the GPS satellites that are the units in our cars communicate with, they're in a lesser gravitational field. They're further away from the center of the Earth.
Yeah.
So the engineers that built those satellites, they need to tune the clocks to run slower to match the clocks in our GPSs to take into account gravitational time dilation.
So, I mean, that's current science.
Yes, it is.
So now you
here's the
multiply
problem.
that by what we would call millions of light years, how far away that stuff is. I mean, so that's going to affect that time hugely.
Yes. Well, but today the universe has been stretched.
Yeah.
And so the difference between the center, and there's good evidence the Earth is near the center of the universe, but that's another topic. The difference between the center and the edge is it's quite small. But before the stretching, if everything was closer together, the difference is very large. And so you have a very large difference in time, the rate at which time flows.
Well, you're saying, I mean, science, I think, does say that the universe is expanding. Is that correct?
The universe has expanded. We would certainly agree with that. There's lots of evidence that the universe has expanded.
So it has been stretched in that sense.
It has been stretched, yeah. Is it still expanding? Well, there's different models. But,
so it's different ideas.
Yes.
That you're not saying
Yes.
yea or nay. I mean, it wouldn't be.
Could be.
But it wouldn't be
Yeah.
unbiblical
No.
to go with that. All right. So I hope that helps some.
Raises more questions, probably.
I'm going to get a sliver scratching my head here. But very interesting stuff. Basically, again, gravity slows down time. That's actually a fact that we can actually verify today.
That's right.
Now that does, put it this way, it's going to put a pebble in somebody's shoe when you talk about the age of the Earth. Remember that one. So I think it's a great argument to actually jot down, and I'm sure Lisa's doing that with her kids at home, saying, all right, this is how we're going to respond next time we're asked that question. Okay, excellent. Let's take an email from Jackson. People in the Old Testament lived to be 900 years old. And in present time, the oldest recorded living person is 116. Do you think that our search for answers and the advancement of science is actually killing us? Your show today is killing us. We're talking about it. Oh, thanks a lot. All right, no, thanks for that, Jackson. All right.
Yes, people used to live longer. That's right, to almost 1,000 years. Methuselah, the oldest recorded living individual. Maybe people lived beyond that. We don't know. But it used to be thought in the kind of early days of creationism that there was a vapor canopy, a layer of water vapor around the Earth that would have shielded out high energy radiation from space. That's what it would have done. And that would allow people to live these great lifespans. Now we know that's not going to do it.
Okay, that wouldn't do it. Okay.
You can change the environment all you want. We're basically programmed to die. We die because of mutations in our genes. Mutations are driving every one of us to death.
Okay.
And so the answer for how people lived that long before the flood is they had better genes. They had fewer mutations, certainly. I mean, each one of us inherits some mutations from our parents. Some of them. And that's been going on for 6,000 years. So we're born with what's called a genetic load. And so that's a major factor leading to aging and death. It's not environmental.
Okay.
You can eat health food and exercise and all that kind of thing, and you're not going to get to 1,000 years.
Well, they say, if you exercise, 20 minutes a day, it'll add 2 years to the end of your life. Bad news is you do the math, those extra 2 years are spent exercising. Oh. That's just so depressing. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to creationism. How did life begin? Love to hear from you. Some lines open here, 1-888-816-2545. You can call with your questions. And there's some great questions, some thought-provoking questions. We need to ask these questions as Christians. Certainly non-Christians are asking them. And I think we should have some intelligent answers for them as believers. So let's get our kids equipped here as well. Creation.com is a great place to go for that. And again, if you're in the Medicine Hat area, there's going to be, you're going to be do some teaching on Saturday at 7 o'clock, and then also 10:30 Sunday morning and 7 o'clock that night as well at the Medicine Hat Church of God. Okay, so that's this weekend. Let's talk just briefly here on living fossils. I found this on your website again, and I thought that I need to know this stuff. Again, transitional fossils, right? I mean, this is supposed to be the evidence, right? That this proves evolution. We can see it, observe it. This is what's happened in the past. Right. Certainly a great lack of these transitional fossils, having trouble finding them. But Dr. Werner, a guy went out and looking for living fossils, modern fossils, and what did he find? It's very interesting.
He found some pretty interesting things, and oftentimes they're kind of put away in the leftover material that's been scraped off of dinosaur bones and so on. And what he's discovered is that a lot of times they weren't interested in that material, But what you find along with dinosaurs
Okay.
are things like ducks, beavers.
So you're saying
modern animals.
There's evidence we have on hand, we can observe, that the dinosaur finds that we're finding today, and again, I mean, they'd be millions of years old, right?
That's what
in
they're saying,
the evolutionary
yes.
model. You're saying you're finding duck fossils,
Yes.
beaver fossils that essentially are exactly the same as the duck and beaver bones we'd have today?
Yes, yeah, essentially modern animals.
Now that does that not present a bit of a problem?
Well, it does. I mean, you have to picture then, I mean, the evolutionists have gone to great lengths to paint this age of dinosaurs, where the dinosaurs were a specific group of animals, and a lot of the modern animals that we have today weren't around at that time, and so on. But the picture we have nowadays is you have T-Rex, fighting with something else, and then a duck comes quacking along.
You don't see that.
No, you don't see that in the kids' books on dinosaurs. But there are fossil ducks found with fossil dinosaurs. So.
And you're saying that they would be dated to the same time if you use the...
Yes, in the same. They're in the same layer of rock. They come from the same strata. So yeah, definitely the same time. Yep.
Okay. Wow.
He's got a book called Living Fossils.
Again, I think that's a really neat pebble to put in somebody's shoe when you're talking about evolution. That's another good argument to use, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. What about probability? It's an interesting thing because you were talking about, is there enough time in 15 billion years, for example,
right,
to see non-life, essentially, a primordial soup, evolve into living organisms that we see today with incredible abilities, as human beings, for example, and so forth. So if you just do the mathematical calculation, the probability and so forth, I noticed on your website it says even if every atom in the universe were an experiment with all the correct amino acids present for every possible molecular vibration, not even one average-sized functional protein would form. So how do you come to that conclusion?
Yes. Well, the number of atoms in the universe is about 10 to the 80th power, and that's a lot of atoms.
So this is measurable, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So science measures this.
Estimate,
okay.
the mass of all the stars and everything that we see out there, and you get about 10 to the 80th atoms in the universe.
Right.
But the probabilities, if you do the math, there isn't enough time, given this completely hypothetical scenario that you just read here. If every atom was involved in experimenting to try to get a living system, it wouldn't work.
So you're saying you're already cutting them some slack, saying if all these amino acids were already in place and the proteins were already in place even with that, you give them a real good head start. You're saying there's not enough time.
If 10 to the 80th atoms were involved in trying to get the amino acids all in sequence at the same time to get something that would work, you can't even do that. But amino acid isn't life.
No.
And the problem is much, we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about probabilities because the problem is much, much worse than the probabilities indicate.
Okay.
Because to get life, you'd need to go from a pool of chemicals on the ancient Earth to a living cell in one step of evolution. Now, why one step? See, a cell has thousands of components that all work together with each other, and to evolve the components separately, they don't do anything. You need all the components there at the same time in order to get life. It's like if we imagine a huge jetliner, parts of a jetliner laying around in a warehouse. You're never going to get flight unless all of those components are assembled and working with each other the way they were designed to do at the same time.
Yeah.
A living cell is the same way. So the probabilities of getting an amino acid, while they might be interesting, they don't explain the magnitude of the problem.
The math doesn't work on it. So, all right, another pebble in the shoe. Let's take Gordon's call from British Columbia. Hi, Gordon. You're on the air with Richard Fangrad. Hi.
I recently seen a scientist that had an equation figured out that showed 6,000 years as the age of the Earth, and it was about whether you look forward from the Big Bang to today or whether you look back from today to the Big Bang.
Okay, are you familiar with that at all, Richard?
I'm not familiar with that. Do you know the name of the scientist, or can you give some more details?
I was hoping you would. All I remember, his equation was 0.015 divided into the 4 billion years.
Okay, yeah, I'm not aware of any dating method where you use the Big Bang to get to 6,000 years, because the Big Bang is all about billions of years. And stellar evolution, it starts off as energy, and then you have hydrogen and maybe some helium, and then that hydrogen gas compresses, and that all takes millions of years. So I've never heard of anything where you can use the Big Bang timescale and get 6,000 years. It sounds interesting, but I've never heard of that.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, Gordon.
It was like you said about stretching time, but it was all about whether you look forward or backward.
Okay, Gordon. Yes, sorry, not familiar with it, but all right. Call us or email us if you get some details on that. The fascinating thing is when you talk about where did life begin. When you look at the evolutionary model and you talk about a primordial soup or whatever, there's some things lying around, matter. The ultimate question is, where did that matter come from then? Did it always exist, or where did it come from? Again, I mean, it's pretty interesting. And again, God, right? Well, the same question could be asked of us as creationists. Where did God come from? And our argument again is that God has always existed. So I guess really the argument from the evolutionist point of view is a matter of faith as well, isn't it?
It does. It gets back to faith. You either believe that matter is eternal, and it existed in some form eternally, because you can't have something from nothing, so matter has to be eternal, or God is eternal. Now, scientifically, matter can't be eternal because of the second law of thermodynamics, right? Everything is constantly deteriorating. If matter was eternal, nothing would be around anymore. Long ago, it would have already deteriorated.
That actually makes logical sense. Thank you so much. Richard Fangrad, our guest today. I'd love to do more of the show. We're just running out of time. But all right, do check out their website. It's a great website, creation.com, of course, and watch their show here on the Miracle Channel on Saturdays. And again, in Medicine Hat, don't forget this weekend he's going to be at the Medicine Hat Church of God as well. So lots of ammo here for you. And of course, the Red Deer Conference at the end of October. All right, on Monday's show, we're going to be talking with Pastor Lawrence Kopp. He's going to share his personal testimony. He went through a lot of difficult times, got mad at God. Have you ever done that? Why do good things, or bad things, happen to good people? We'll talk to you on Monday.